Rust has been in the top 100 global sellers on Steam for nearly 7 years straight, and most of that time has been spent in the top 25. And for the entirety of its development, Rust has been using the game engine Unity, which has recently caused controversy in the game developer scene. So much so that Gary Newman told Unity to get fucked in his recent blog post. Basically what Unity wants to do 3 years after they released their IPO and 1 year after recently raising the price on their subscription for developers is that they want to charge developers now for every install of the game. They recently made a post saying that, oh, we're going to track to make sure that it's not multiple reinstalls from the same user. But as you can see from the main developer, Alistair, that's not going to work, especially since there's many ways that hackers can get around this and, manipulate the system if they have some sort of beef with a game that uses Unity outside of Rust, because this affects everybody that develops games on Unity. And Unity came out and said that 90% of developers won't be affected by this because there's some sort of threshold of like $1 million before this takes effect on you. But there's just so many ways that a revenue model like this can be manipulated by hackers, by, people who are out to get at a developer of a game. This could potentially cost a developer millions of dollars. And in the end, Unity is the one who's going to get to decide how many installs, you're going to have to pay us this month. And the developers aren't really going to have a say. So if half of those numbers are falsified by hackers who have figured out a script that they can just reinstall, uninstall the game without the tracking system set in place by Unity noticing, well, then guess what? That developer is going to have to pay a set amount of money, which is going to end up being hundreds of thousands to potentially millions of dollars. So what is the thought process behind Unity doing this 3 years after they've launched their IPO, which means they're publicly traded on the stock market and they're sitting at around $30 right now per share, which is not that bad. 1 year after they raised the price on their subscription service, which has been in existence for a very long time, and that's their main business model, I'm assuming, and they make a ton of money off of that. I mean, how much money do you really need as a company like this to make it work? And now you're coming out with this revenue model that can be easily manipulated. Well, this is what they had to say. Today, a large majority of Unity editor users are currently not paying anything and will not be affected by this change. The Unity runtime fee will not impact the majority of our developers. The developers who will be impacted are generally those who have successful games and are generating revenue way above the thresholds we outlined in our blog. Basically saying we've got people that have become too successful using our game engine that we already charged them to use. So let's find out a way that we can tax them and take a percentage of their company just because they use our game engine, which is outrageous to think about. Imagine you're a chef, right? And you buy a grill for your kitchen, and all of a sudden the owner of that grill is like, every time you make a burger on that grill, you need to start paying us for it because you're using our grill. But don't worry about it, because if you're not making this much amount of money per year, then you're not affected by it. But everybody else, who's really successful using our grill, we're taking a percentage of every burger you flip on that thing. Oh, and by the way, if some random dude comes up and says, I bought 500 burgers from this restaurant, but it's not in their inventory, we're going to charge you for those too, even if you never actually made them. So what does this mean for Rust? In Gary Newman's recent blog, he said Rust 2 will definitely not be on Unity. It's not about the money. We could pay it. It's about the fact that Unity did this without discussing it with anybody. There are so many game developers that make games and make money off of those games using the Unity engine, and they just did it out of the blue, which could it's something that can heavily impact everybody that develops on Unity. So imagine what they might do in the future, because now we've got evidence of the past that they're in it for the money, and they're not willing to discuss it with the people who use this on a regular basis before making these policy changes. So in the future, if Rust decides to switch from Unity, is it even possible? Well, we can go take a look at CSGO and see how they're launching CSGO 2 right now. And if you are able to play CSGO 2, you'll notice when you launch the game that you have two options. You can either play CSGO or you can play CSGO 2, which is technically still in development. And eventually CSGO 2 is just going to replace CSGO, or they're both going to be there and be playable, which means that if Rust is able to port all their assets to a different engine, they technically could replace its current listing with Rust on a new game engine and still be able to keep all of the skins on the community market the same. Only time will tell if they decide to make this move. For now, everything is just words, people going back and forth. The policy doesn't take effect until next year on January 1st. So Unity still has time to redeem itself and, take a step back and say, this might have been a little greedy. We've got nothing but negative input coming from everybody that uses our engine. Maybe we shouldn't do this, or maybe we should do it differently, or maybe we need to find a different source of revenue if we're really struggling, to make money as a company. And based off of the stock market today, we could see that just words have impacted, as you can see here. But for now, if you want to get involved, Rust 2 is trending on Twitter, and we've got people like Unreal Engine coming out with some spicy posts in retaliation. It'll be pretty interesting to see how this plays out if they decide to go through with it.